Well, good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for saying it back. Not everybody says it back. It's great to be back here. I actually gave, I think, my very first large talk right here from the stage. I was a criminal justice major, and it was a criminal justice chapel. And nobody wanted to do it, so Alycia got to do the speaking. And I think I went a little long, and Dr. Davis was the chaplain at that time, and I remember him getting a little antsy in his seat, maybe to pull the microphone out of my hand or whatever. But hopefully I won't do that today, so you don't have to worry about that. But it's always good to be back home. I am Rochester born and raised, and yes, woo! And I live in Boston now, and they're building a Wegmans, guys. Like, you don't know how that changes your life, okay? There's already like 2 there, and they're building one a mile from my house. I'm like, I'm never have to move now. This is good. Wegmans, Empire Apples, I'll be fine. But I just want to thank you so much for giving the opportunity to be here. You never know how, when you'll leave here, how certain people that you've met here and will really impact your life. As I look over my life, I've had 3 people that were just largely influential to make me this person I am today. One of them is my grandmother, who I'll talk about a little bit later on. One of them was Dr. Ron Holman, who was my criminal justice professor for many years and really taught me how to see people through the eyes of God. I didn't know becoming a criminal justice major would make me, be more loving towards the criminals, but it did. He really shaped that. And, of course, Dr. Davis, who took a girl who grew up in church and taught her to see God in a whole new way and shaped the way that I view him and I understand him even to this day. And so you never know how this environment will impact you and change you. I'd also need to mention that I'll be doing a lunch, I'll be eating lunch here, so if any of you want to chat or come hang with me, that'd be great, so I'm not sitting by myself, because I know those Garlock days of sitting and eating lunch by yourself, okay? So if any of you want to, join me, you're welcome to do that. And one final thing, I really have fought the social media bug for a while. I mean, I'm on Facebook, I did that. Welcome to 2017, Alycia. But, the other things I really resisted, but we have a social media department at my job, and so they're always really pushing the social media stuff. So I really resisted Twitter for the longest of times because I'm not a twit. However, the times have changed, and I'm now on Twitter, and actually I really, really like it. So you are welcome to follow me on Twitter, and that will make my social media department very happy because I am, trying to move into the modern day era. So there is my number. No, it is not the year that I was born. Thank you so much for asking that. Many people wonder that, but it's actually my ice hockey number is 88. So anyways, you're welcome to join me there. It seems like I have one of the heavy topics today. I think it's one of the questions, suffering is one of the questions that plagues any Christian theologian or apologist or anybody who has to speak on anything regarding Christianity or defend Christianity. Because it's hard. It's a tough one. We talk about a God who is good and is loving, yet we see all this agony and pain, and we experience it ourselves. I remember one time I was in a Q&A. We did a talk on maybe science and faith or they at war, something like that. And a Q&A time, and a young lady raised her hand and asked me about why God allows suffering. And I can see her, but she's facing me, so the audience can't see her. And as I'm responding, I can see her. She's just bawling. Tears are just streaming down her face. And I don't know if she's just been diagnosed with cancer. I don't know if somebody close to her died. I don't know what's going on. But that's what happens when we deal with this question of suffering. It's a painful thing. It's not an easy thing. And I'm hoping that today in some way I can bring some light to it, because I think Christianity offers a really good answer to this. If you were to ask a Muslim why suffering happens, they would say, well, it's inshallah. In other words, up to the will of Allah. What Allah wills, Allah does. And so a Muslim won't necessarily fight against the suffering. They will just kind of accept it as part of God's plan. They may grieve, but they won't protest against him. If you were to ask a Hindu, well, they will say, well, you're going through what you're going through because you did some bad things in a previous life. You lived a good life previously, you'll live a good life now. If you lived a bad life previously, you did a bad life now. So you actually brought this on yourself. You caused the suffering. If you were to ask an atheist, they would just say, well, deal with it. This is life. Why do you think that life is supposed to be happy? Why would you think that life is supposed to be good? We're just dancing to our DNA. This is the way our genes are carrying themselves out. Deal with it. Genes don't care about how you're feeling. None of those answers really give me much hope. None of those answers make me smile at all. But the Christian answer, which some people ask why to, is basically that God creates a world in which he desires that people experience something that we all take for granted, I think, on a daily basis, and that's the idea of love. He creates a world in which love is possible, but in order for a world to be created in which love is possible, we have to be given the opportunity to choose to not love. And the minute we choose to not love, the minute we choose to just rebel against God from the beginning, it threw everything into chaos. Ourselves, the way we treat each other, our body, even the earth groans, and all the suffering that we experience is attributed to that. But now that I've given you some idea of a why, or try to unpack this a little bit for you, do you suddenly feel better when you get some kind of diagnosis of some kind of ailment, or when somebody close to you die? In other words, when I tell you why, when I explain you why we live in a world that's broken, does it make you feel better? I remember I was back when I was studying in Oxford. I was speaking, or actually somebody else was speaking at a local private school, high school. And a young lady came up to me at the end. She was about 17 years old, and she said, "Alycia, my dad was a drunk. He was an alcoholic. And we've tried for years to make him better. We tried for years to help him get into rehab and help change things in his life. But eventually he died from the alcoholism. Eventually it killed him. Why did God let that happen?" What would you say to that? The short answer, let's just say this. The short answer I give her is, I don't know specifically why God allowed that to happen. Unless God gave me some particular revelation as to why this particular thing happened to you, I don't know specifically why. But what if I did? What if God had given me some sort of dream or spoke to me and said, "Alycia, this is why her father did this, so go tell her what the reason is." So I approach her the next day and say, "Hey, I know why your father drank himself to death, because God told me. And the reason why he drank himself to death was because he never wanted kids. So he drank himself to death because he didn't want kids." Now, how does that make her feel? In other words, the minute you know the why, does it necessarily make you feel better? In fact, it could make you feel worse. And in her case, it very well would have made her feel worse. Your father drank himself to death because he didn't want you. And I think that is one of the reasons why God withholds the why from us, because it really wouldn't make things better. We have this natural inclination to assume that if I get the why, if I know the answer, then I'll be okay. But will we? We don't know that. We can't guarantee that. So if God's solution to our pain isn't in explaining to us the why, then maybe it's something else. Maybe the solution is something else. And that's what I want to explore with you today. That maybe there's a different way that we can find comfort other than intellectually understanding the why behind it. And I think actually when we take a look at the Bible and we look at a variety of different stories in the Bible, I think we can actually get some answers, because God communicates three very important things in times of suffering. Number one, we need to remember who he is. In other words, remember who I am. Remember I am here. And remember I am hope. Remember who I am, remember I am here, and remember I am hope. Perhaps the story of Job can help us better understand this. Many of you are familiar with the story of Job. I probably don't need to rehash it for you. But in a very short amount of time, Job had a very, very bad set of weeks or day or hours or however long it took. Okay? He lost possessions. He lost livestock. He lost children. And for about 36 chapters, Job is crying out to know why. And he's got these friends who are giving him answers and trying to explain to him. They didn't do a very good job. But God is quiet. Not a word. And then in chapter 38, God speaks. "Job, where were you when I laid the foundations of the earth? Do you know its measurements? Tell me, surely you know." And he goes on to talk about how he asked Job, "Are you there when the wild ox gives birth? Can you loose the belt of Orion like the stars, like the constellation? Can you pull apart the stars?" And he goes on for 3 chapters, to talk about who he is. And what is so fascinating about this story to me is that at the end of it all, Job says, "Man, he said, I uttered words I didn't understand. Before my ears heard of you, but now my eyes see you." They see you. "And now I repent in dust and ashes." This sense where Job sees him is reminded of who God is. And you know what's fascinating about that? Job never got the answer to why. All those chapters he asked God why. And God never told him. And it turned out Job never even needed to know why. Job didn't even need the answer to be able to find a way to deal and live in his pain. God spoke of a bigger picture and reminded Job of who he was. Essentially, be still, Job, and know that I am God. That's it. No explanation. And do you think God somehow messed up? He didn't know best how to comfort him? No, I think he knew exactly what he needed to do to comfort Job in that time. And why wasn't the way to do it? In fact, there's a good chance that we know more about Job's story than Job knew about Job's story, because we have the privilege of reading Job chapter 1. We know more about him than even he understood. And so God reminds us, don't forget who I am, because I am here. I was one of those tomboys as a kid. My mom had me in like ballet and like beauty pageants and modeling school. And I used to be so excited when I fell off my bike and scraped my knee. I'm like, look at my scar. You know, that was kind of me. I was always that kind of person. And then I grew up to play hockey, and she was like, forget it, I tried. But when you think back to those times as a kid, and you're out riding your bike and you fall, right? You scrape your knee. And what's the first thing that you do in that moment? Is you cry out for mom, right? Mom, come to me. And so she comes out. And when she comes out, in that moment, do you want her to talk to you about what gravity is and then exactly what's happening in your body as your blood cells are trying to clot and everything? Do you want all this explanation as to what's going on? Or do you just want mom? In that moment, do you just want mom to hug you and to hold you? In that moment, do you just want her near? You just want to feel her near. See, when someone suffers, we want to go with them. We want to be with them. We want to hug them. We want to listen to them. We want to talk to them. We want to let them know they're not alone. In some way, maybe our presence can bring them comfort. Now imagine if the person comforting us wasn't each other, but it was God. Imagine the level of comfort that would be. Imagine how much greater that level of comfort would be. Perhaps you guys have heard of a woman named Corrie ten Boom. She was born in 1892 in Amsterdam, and she is a Christian. She became an author and wrote over 55 books. But her and her family became known for their role in hiding Jews during World War II. It's estimated that about 800 Jews were hidden in her house over the course of the amount of years that they did that. But in 1944, her and her family were arrested for hiding the Jews. And she was sent to solitary confinement in prison for 7 weeks. Imagine 7 weeks, guys, of no human contact. Now, that's really hard to imagine this day and age because we have all the social media and we've got cell phones and we're constantly in contact with people. Imagine going 7 weeks of silence, except for the person maybe bringing you your food. And that's what she went through. And she writes and talks about the physical, mental, and emotional pain that she went through during this grief or this deep time of loneliness. And she went ahead and wrote these words. She said, I talked with God. Never before had fellowship with him been so close. It was a joy I hoped would continue unchanged. I was a prisoner, and yet, how free. I was no longer alone. God was with me. With him, I could go on. And once more, I saw the blue sky, the flowers and shrubs, and I saw the garden as a part of a beautiful free world in which I, too, should someday be able to walk about. If you notice, her comfort in being alone, and remember, she was suffering for trying to save lives. Her comfort didn't come in knowing why. Her comfort came in knowing who was with her, and she found comfort in him. And this way of going through pain is not isolated to just Corrie ten Boom, because it seems like this is a common thing, because for whatever reason, God has decided to deal with suffering not by waving a magic wand and making it go away, but by entering into it, by being involved in it, by not being distant from it. But how could that be possible? How could a God who is so distant ever understand or feel what we feel? Well, the Bible states that Jesus is the image of the invisible God. In other words, Jesus is God himself, and Jesus felt pain and suffering even to the point of crucifixion. I love the way Edward Shalito puts it. He says, if we have never sought thee, we seek thee now. Thine eyes burn through the dark, are only stars. We must have sight of thorn pricks on thy brow. We must have thee, O Jesus, of the scars. The heavens frighten us, they are too calm. In all the universe we have no place. Our wounds are hurting us. Where is the balm? Lord Jesus, by thy scars we claim thy grace. If when the doors are shut thou drawest near, only reveal those hands, that side of thine. We know today what wounds are. Have no fear. Show us thy scars. We know the countersign. The other gods were strong, but thou wast weak. They rode, but thou didst stumble to a throne. But to our wounds, only God's wounds can speak. And not a god has wounds, but thou alone. In Islam, it's considered blasphemous that God would dare come down here, come this close to such a filthy human race, let alone die on the cross. Islam is the only major world religion that denies that Jesus even was crucified. Even an atheist will accept that because there's so much evidence for it. It's written about outside of the Bible. But they can't even fathom the fact that God would ever dare enter into the pain and agony of this world. But yet I think it was Dostoevsky who said, I may not know the reason for suffering, but I know that no other God has scars. And Christianity talks about a God who has scars, who is so different than any other religion or any other belief. Understanding why or knowledge is only a passive intellectual response. But as my favorite author, Philip Yancey, says, he says, no intellectual answer will solve suffering. Perhaps this is why God sent his own son as one response to human pain, to experience it and absorb it into himself. The incarnation did not solve human suffering, but at least it was an active, personal response. In the truest sense, no words can speak more loudly than the Word who was from the beginning. God didn't exempt himself from suffering. He left his safe place to come into this world and enter into our pain, our agony, and he himself suffers. And when he comforts us, he knows exactly what we're going through because he too has experienced it. Where is God? Right here. It's kind of like when our mom grabs us after we fall off the bike and gives us a big hug. And she knows what we feel like because she thinks back to when she was a kid. And she thinks about those 2 scars that are on her knees. And she fully knows what our tears are all about. Remember who he is, that he's there, because he is our only hope. God offers hope. And without hope, it's even harder to walk through this life. Suffering can make us feel helpless, but it doesn't make us feel hopeless. Christianity points towards a future that is more than this life. It promises a world where there will be one day no more pain and suffering, where people will be reunited with their Creator and live in a way that they were intended to live. And no, that won't erase what's going on now, but it does let you know that you can't erase what is to come. That no amount of suffering, no amount of pain, no amount of crazy decisions made by world leaders can change the guarantee of what is to come. And that is what God has promised us. That heaven awaits, a better world, a better place, a life with our Creator. And hope changes the way that you live, because hope isn't just a possibility. The way that Bible talks about hope, they talk about it more as a guarantee. Many of you probably have your license, and you know that when you get in a car, one of the first things you should do is put on your seatbelt. Why is that? Because you know that there's a possibility that you could get in a car accident. But what if you were going to get in your car and you knew with a guarantee that you would get into a car accident? Would you get in your car and put on your seatbelt? Or would you not get in your car at all? In other words, a guarantee overhauls the way that you live. The possibility of getting an accident means I'm just going to put on my seatbelt. But you're still going to get in your car and you're still going to go about your life. But a guarantee will stop you dead in your tracks. And it'll change the way that you experience. And that is what hope is talked about in Christianity. It's a guarantee of what's to come. And that doesn't mean the Christian life is going to be all happy, happy, joy, and excitement and all that kind of stuff all the time, and we're just skipping around and life is full of balloons and fun things. It is full of pain. It is full of grief. But it does mean that in the midst of the pain, in the midst of the agony, there is always hope. And what else is there left for somebody to hold on to in the midst of feeling so weak and so at the end of their strength, but a promise that they will one day smile again? My grandmother passed away, I guess, just over 2 years ago now. She was a 5'0" Jamaican lady, as cute as a button. I don't know if any of you have a Jamaican grandmother. If you don't, you need to find one who has one and borrow theirs, because they are amazing and they know how to cook and they're just adorable. Yep, that's right. Woo, I'm glad. Maybe there's some Jamaicans or Islanders in the house. But my grandmother would tell me, she goes, Alycia, I'm not very smart, and she wasn't. She went up to maybe 6th grade in Jamaica, and then she had to leave because she had to work for the family. Her sister, who just died a few months ago, couldn't even read. She could write her name, and maybe recognize her name, but that's pretty much it. So she wasn't very intellectually, by our standards, intellectually smart. Several years ago, we noticed she started forgetting things. And she would leave the oven on, and different things like that would happen. And so we brought her into the hospital, and they diagnosed her with Alzheimer's, which was devastating for me because she was the big spiritual role model for me growing up. Although she would say to me, although I'm not very smart, Alycia, God teaches me, and he teaches me things. And I remember being a little girl walking into her room early in the morning, and she would be on her knees before God, just praying and crying over the Bible and just praying for every one of her grandchildren and just life and everything. And I remember being a little kid looking at her and being like, God, one day when I grow up, I'm going to love you like that. I don't understand it now because I'm just 8, but one day, God, maybe when I'm an adult, then I'll get it. And so when this woman, this amazing spiritual role model for me, was diagnosed with Alzheimer's, I was devastated. And we would go and we would visit her, and bit by bit, she would slowly start to fade on us. But I remember the very last time I went there, I brought my little sister with me, who's not really little, she's 18, but brought her with me to the nursing home. And we were just reading her Bible, and her roommate was just crying out, nobody loves me, nobody cares about me, and I'm all alone, and all these kind of things. My grandmother was just sitting there very quiet. And we finished reading the Bible. We laid her down in her bed. And my grandmother hasn't really said anything at this point in probably 2 years, 2-3 years. She kind of would just mumble maybe a little bit. You weren't even sure if she even recognized you. She kind of just quiet and just sat there. And so we prayed with her and lowered her into her bed. And she started mumbling. And I kind of just leaned over to her. And she was just mumbling. And all of a sudden, as clear as day, this woman who has not said anything to me in probably 2+ years, she goes mumble, and goes, thank the Lord, and goes back to mumbling. The last words I ever heard that woman say were, thank the Lord. Not because she was better, because long ago, she had put her hope in something that even in the midst of her pain, even in the midst of not fully knowing where she was anymore, that was all that she could utter. A woman who knew God and knew no other way to deal with life than to walk it hand in hand with him. Hope gave her joy even in death. And the crucifixion, the central doctrine in Christianity, tells us that one day things will change. One day things will get better. The cross lets us know that we are going to be, that through the cross we can be reunited with God. We can be forgiven for our sins. And that means that we have a hope for a better world and a better place. The last book of the Bible gives us a glimpse as to what the world will be like. And I'll conclude on this final thought. It says, the author of the book of Revelation writes this. He says, then I saw a new earth. The first earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. I, John, saw the holy city coming down out of heaven from God. And I heard a loud voice from heaven saying, look, the tabernacle of God is with men, and he will dwell with them. They will be his people, and God himself will be with them and be their God. God will wipe away all tears from their eyes. There will be no more death. Neither will there be any more sorrow, nor crying, nor pain, for the former things have passed away. Then God said, look, I am making all things new. Let's pray together. Lord, we thank you that we have a God who is with us and wants to be with us in the midst of our agony and suffering and pain. And we ask, Lord, that we would feel that even more. We would feel that even greater. That we would find ourselves even closer to you than we were before. We thank you for your love. We thank you for your forgiveness. And we thank you for the way that you embrace us when we feel so alone. Amen.